Hi everyone, I am John Cardinal, the preparator at Fort Ticonderoga, currently working from home. Now, as preparator, it is my job to make the mounts and displays for the upcoming exhibits. You might think that somebody in my position would need to be on site to make the exhibit or have access to the objects in order to make the mounts. But I'm actually here today to show you how to make simple brass rod mounts. This one will actually be for a powder horn at home, working off of a series of measurements. Okay, let's take a look at some tools and materials. First off, we have a pair of needle nose pliers, a pair of diagonal cutters, measuring tape, some rosin core solder, a soldering iron, some heat shrink tubing for electrical work, a lighter, a metal file, and some 1/8 inch thick brass rod. Now it's important to get a annealed brass rod because it's nice and soft and will make mount making a whole lot easier. Now our case is 9 inches deep. We want the powder horn to sit just over halfway in the case, so we're going to cut it a little bit longer than halfway. But the ends are very rough, so we take the file, we smooth them out. There are different ways to do this. It's easier to actually hold the rod at this point. And filing. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So, what we need to do now is actually make the arms that will hold the powder horn. So we cut this one a little bit longer. Do the same thing. You want to make sure those ends are nice and smooth. Okay, now we're taking that longer piece, pair of needle nose pliers, and just very methodically and carefully bending the rod little by little. This will give us a curved arc, which will cradle the curved horn. Now once that's done, clear some space. Want to get some solder out, make sure the iron is hot. We want to put just a little bit of solder on each of the points that will be connected. Now it's important when you're doing this to hold on to the brass rod with a pair of pliers because brass rod is really good at conducting heat and you will burn yourself. So don't do that. Okay. Sometimes, yeah, it would have just been easier to get some flux to do this. A lot easier to use flux instead of the rosin core. It's also important to note to be working on a piece of scrap wood. You don't want to be messing up your workstation, and melted solder will burn a wooden surface. So then, we are connecting the 2 points together. More solder. You really want to make sure this joint is nice and strong. Okay, so now that the internals are done, It is time to move on to the next step. Nope, we're gonna add some more solder. Because again, you can never be too careful, especially with mounts. All right, so we need a protective barrier between the brass rod and the object. We don't want them to interact with each other. So that's where this electrical heat shrink tubing comes into play. So you just slip it on, cut it off a little bit longer than what you need, and using the lighter, making sure not to use it in one spot too long, heat it up and it will tighten over the rod. Now with the end, you can leave it just a little bit longer. You don't want it to actually catch on fire, but if it gets molten enough just a little bit, you can then use a flat, hard surface to then fold it over on itself and make nice, clean ends. Okay, one side done. Now to the other. Now the thing about heat shrink tubing is that it comes in multiple different colors, black, white, I even saw red before. So you can really use it to match whatever the object is or the background of the display. Both ends finished. Huh, nope. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now for the main shaft. Now we don't want the heat shrink tubing to go all the way to the end. So we're gonna cut it just a little bit short because the brass rod is gonna fit into the back of the case with a friction fit. And that brass rod cannot have any of that material on it. There we go, just like that. Heat it up just like before, spinning it. Kind of like a rotisserie fork. Okay. Should be getting close. Yeah, but now we have that weird center spot, the joint. That still needs to be covered. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be a little creative. Gonna take some of this heat shrink tubing, cut it, slide it on over, and secure the other side. Now, it's important to note that this seam does not need to be pretty. No one's gonna see it. It's gonna be hidden behind the object. The main point of it is to just have a buffer between the material, i.e. the brass rod and the solder, and the horn itself, because we don't want those to stain the horn. Heating it up. Final fit, and we're done.